Hello, Patriots. Welcome to Doug's Democracy Den. Here in the Den, we like to talk about American government, politics, and current events. Every time we meet in the Den, we honor our country and our flag by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Please feel free to join. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Today on the Den is the fifth and final installment of the series Understanding the U.S. Constitution. Today we're looking at a couple of concepts, something called the clauses and something called amending the Constitution. If you have viewed previous episodes, you'll know that in Article 1, when talking about Congress, I mentioned something called Article 1, Section 8. Article 1, Section 8, which is a list of duties given to Congress by the founders. Now that Section 8 is not the same Section 8 that Corporal Klinger and Mass was trying to get. This Section 8 is the 8th section in Article 1. That list of 17 things given to the founders, given to the Congress by the founders, there are a couple of interesting clauses in there which have actually helped to strengthen Congress power over the years. First of all, the entire list is referred to as the enumeration clause. That's the first clause. The entire list in Article 1, Section 8 is referred to as the enumeration clause, an enumerated list of duties to be done by Congress. So that would be fine. The founders said, here's your to-do list, that's all you do, done. But then they made it a little more complicated in the final paragraph. In the final paragraph, they put in something that said, and where Congress feels it is necessary and proper to do so, in effect, they can extend their power. That is known as the necessary and proper clause. Why would they do that? When the founders were constructing this in 1787, they knew they were facing an unknowable future, as we are every day. And they didn't know what might happen in the future, which might somehow restrict Congress' ability to carry out that list of 17 things. They wanted to make sure Congress always had enough power to do those 17 things. So they said, we better give Congress the ability to extend their power to be able to do those 17 if they face some big threat in the future. So what the founders were saying to Congress is, where you feel it is necessary and proper to do so, you may extend your power or stretch your power in order to be able to carry out our to-do list. The necessary and proper clause is also referred to sometimes as the elastic clause because it allows Congress to stretch its power wherever they feel the need to do so. Now in the early days, there wasn't much stretching. But as we've gotten into modern times, Congress has felt more and more interested in getting into more and more things. A couple of examples. We never used to have national parks. Congress decided it would be good for the federal government to get into the park business and create national parks. Most of us would agree that's a very good thing. And it was necessary and proper for them to preserve wild spaces for us as citizens. There's another area. In 1979, Congress decided it should get into the education business. And they felt it was necessary and proper for them to create the Department of Education and start issuing education laws. Well, since 1979, our educational performance in this country has declined since the feds have been involved. So they thought it was necessary and proper for them to get involved, but the outcome have not necessarily indicated that. And they also created another issue. Since the country began, education was always a state issue. It was the province of the states to create education policy for their state. So you have 200 years of education policy created by states. In 79, the feds start issuing education policies. Do you think it's possible that some of the policies issued by the feds beginning in 79 might come into conflict with some of the 200 years of education policy already created by the states? Well, absolutely. It would be inevitable. that there would be conflict between what the feds were creating and what the states were creating, simply because the states had already created all kinds of stuff. However, how this system works, the feds don't care about that because of the next clause. You got to leave Article 1 and go all the way to Article 8. And in Article 8, in the middle paragraph, there are only 3 paragraphs in Article 8. In Article 8, in the middle paragraph, is something called the Supremacy Clause. It says that the U.S. Constitution and all laws made by Congress based on the Constitution are the supreme law of the land, and any laws of any state thereby which are contrary, notwithstanding. What does that mean? That means Congress can use the necessary and proper clause to create any laws they want in any area, and if there's conflict, they don't care, because the Supremacy Clause says that their law is supreme. So when the Department of Education started cranking out all this education policy, they didn't care if it conflicted with state law, because they knew the Supremacy Clause meant their law was supreme, and the state law didn't matter. So the combination of the necessary and proper clause and the Supremacy Clause has allowed the Congress to expand and stretch its power into all kinds of things that the founders didn't intend for them to be in. Some of them have been good, like the National Park System. Some of them have been questionable at best, like the Department of Education. There are the clauses: the enumeration clause, necessary and proper clause, and the Supremacy Clause. Now, the other way that the founders gave to change the Constitution, because in effect Congress is changing their power within the Constitution, the other way that Congress gave us to change the Constitution is the amendment process. They knew there would have to be changes made. How does the amendment process work? Somebody submits an idea for an amendment to Congress. Yep, there's Congress. Congress has to first vote on it. Both the House and the Senate have to approve it. But that's where we have a change. Normal legislation then goes to the President for signature. In the amendment process, the President is not involved. Doesn't matter what the President thinks of it. It has to be passed by the House and the Senate, and then that amendment is made available to all 50 states. And the 50 states can vote on it if they want. They don't have to. But if you're somebody who's pushing an amendment and Congress has passed your amendment, you're hoping that the states will get involved in it and vote on it, because you need a lot of them to vote on it. When it goes through Congress, it needs a higher threshold than a normal law. A normal law needs 50%. A constitutional amendment needs 2/3. 2/3 of Congress has to approve it. In the Senate, you got to get 67 senators to approve it. Then you go out to the states. We have 50 states. You have to get 3/4 of the states to approve it. That means you need 38 states. So to amend the Constitution is a real simple process, but really hard to do. You got to get 2/3 yes vote in the House. You got to get 2/3 yes vote in the Senate. And then you have to get 38 states to approve it. If you meet all that criteria, you have amended the Constitution. But there's another thing. Once Congress approves it and it's made available to the states, there's a 7-year clock that begins. You have 7 years in which to get 38 states to approve it. If you don't make it within 7 years, your amendment dies. And that's a really tough way to go. So, 2/3 in the House, 2/3 in the Senate, 3/4 of the state within 7 years. That's how you amend the Constitution. Trivia question for you. Has this country ever added an amendment to the Constitution and then removed it? That seems rather silly. Why would you do that? Well, here's the answer. Yes. In 1919, this country decided that it would be a good idea to ban alcohol. It's known as Prohibition. Prohibition began in 1919. Several years later, in 1934, this country repealed Prohibition. So we add the amendment banning alcohol in 1919, we remove the amendment banning alcohol in 1934. That's the only time that's happened. It was the beginning of the Great Depression. I guess they all figured they needed to drink at that point. This has been a look at the clauses that allow Congress to extend their power, and it's been a look at how you can amend your own U.S. Constitution. This wraps up the 5-part Understanding of the U.S. Constitution series. Thank you for visiting Doug's Democracy Den.